There is a moment, often subtle, often invisible, where everything begins to change. Not because your environment shifts, not because someone gives you permission, but because a pattern inside your brain rewires itself. That moment is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly when you decide to see effort differently, when discomfort stops being a signal to quit and starts becoming a signal that something meaningful is happening. Your brain is constantly evaluating, is this worth it? Is this safe? Should I continue? These questions operate beneath conscious awareness, driven by circuits that evolve to conserve energy and avoid pain. But the same machinery that once kept you alive can now hold you back. The mindset that changes everything is the one that reinterprets these signals, not as barriers, but as gateways. When you experience resistance, what you are actually feeling is a prediction error. Your brain expected ease, but encountered friction. Most people respond by withdrawing, reinforcing a loop that says discomfort equals danger. But when you lean into that friction, something remarkable happens. Neural pathways begin to reorganize. The brain starts associating effort with reward, not punishment. Over time, this shift becomes automatic. This is not about blind positivity or forcing motivation. It's about training your nervous system to recognize that effort itself is valuable. Dopamine, often misunderstood as a pleasure chemical, is more accurately a molecule of pursuit. It rises not when you achieve something, but when you move towards something with intention. When you adopt the mindset that effort is the reward, you unlock a sustainable source of drive. Think about the difference between waiting to feel motivated and acting despite not feeling motivated. In the first case, you are dependent on external or internal states that fluctuate unpredictably. In the second, you are building a system where action generates motivation. Each time you follow through on something difficult, your brain updates its internal model. This is who I am. This is what I do. Identity is not fixed. It is constructed through repeated evidence. Every action you take is a vote toward the type of person you become. When you avoid challenges, you reinforce an identity of hesitation. When you face them, even imperfectly, you reinforce an identity of capability. Over time, these small votes accumulate into something powerful, a self-concept that no longer questions whether you can handle difficulty, but assumes it. There is also a physiological component to this. When you engage in effortful tasks, your body activates stress responses, elevated heart rate, increased alertness, heightened focus. Most people interpret these sensations as negative, but these are the exact states that optimize performance. The mindset shift is learning to label these sensations not as anxiety, but as readiness. Language matters. The way you describe your internal experience shapes how your brain processes it. If you say, I'm stressed, your system contracts. If you say I'm activated, your system prepares. This is not semantic, it is biological. Words influence neural circuits, which influence behavior. Another key element is time perception. The brain tends to exaggerate the discomfort of starting a task and underestimate the satisfaction of completing it. This creates a bias toward procrastination. But when you commit to just beginning, just a small defined action, you bypass this distortion. Momentum builds quickly, and with it, a sense of control. Control is central to motivation. When you feel that your actions influence outcomes, your brain releases more dopamine, reinforcing engagement. When you feel helpless, that system shuts down. The mindset that changes everything is rooted in reclaiming agency, even in small ways. You may not control the entire situation, but you can always control the next action. Consistency plays a crucial role here. Not intensity, not perfection, consistency. The brain changes through repetition. Each time you engage in a behavior, you strengthen the neural circuits associated with it. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. This is how habits form, and habits are the foundation of long-term transformation. It's also important to understand the role of failure. From a neural perspective, failure is information. It provides data that your brain uses to adjust strategies. But if you attach emotional weight to failure, if you interpret it as a reflection of your worth, you disrupt this process. The mindset shift is to see failure as feedback, nothing more. Curiosity can be a powerful tool here. When you approach challenges with curiosity rather than judgment, you keep your brain in a flexible, adaptive state. You become more willing to experiment, to try again, to iterate. This openness accelerates learning and reduces the fear associated with uncertainty. Environment also matters. Your brain is highly sensitive to cues. The people you interact with, the spaces you occupy, the information you consume, all of these shape your internal state. If you surround yourself with signals that reinforce growth, effort, and resilience, you make it easier to adopt and maintain this mindset. But ultimately, the shift is internal. It is the decision to stop negotiating with discomfort and start collaborating with it. To recognize that the very sensations you've been avoiding are the ones that signal progress. To understand that your brain is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic system that adapts based on how you use it. There will be days when it feels harder, when the resistance is stronger, when the old patterns resurface. This is not a sign that you've failed. It is part of the process. Change is not linear. It involves cycles of progress and regression. What matters is not eliminating these fluctuations, but learning how to navigate them. One practical approach is to anchor your actions to specific cues. Instead of relying on vague intentions, create clear triggers. A time, a place, a preceding action. This reduces the cognitive load required to initiate behavior and increases the likelihood of follow-through. Over time, these cues become automatic prompts, guiding your behavior without conscious effort. Recovery is equally important. The brain and body need periods of rest to consolidate learning and restore energy. Pushing constantly without recovery leads to diminishing returns. The mindset that changes everything includes an understanding of balance, knowing when to push and when to pause. There is also a social dimension. Humans are wired for connection, and social reinforcement can amplify motivation. Sharing your goals, surrounding yourself with people who value growth, and engaging in collective effort can strengthen your commitment. The brain responds strongly to social cues, and leveraging this can be a powerful strategy. At its core, this mindset is about redefining your relationship with effort, discomfort, and uncertainty. It is about seeing these not as obstacles, but as integral components of growth. It is about training your brain to operate in alignment with your goals rather than in opposition to them. Every time you choose to engage rather than avoid, to act rather than wait, to persist rather than quit, you are reshaping your neural architecture. You are building a system that supports the person you want to become. And while the changes may be gradual, they are cumulative. Over time, they lead to outcomes that once seemed out of reach. The most important thing to understand is that this process is available to you at any moment. It does not require special circumstances or extraordinary talent. It begins with a simple shift in perspective, a willingness to reinterpret what you feel, and to act in accordance with what you value rather than what is comfortable. That is the mindset that changes everything. That is the mindset that changes everything. And once you begin to operate from that place, you start to notice something subtle but profound. The things that once felt overwhelming begin to feel structured, almost predictable. Not because they've become easier in an absolute sense, but because your brain has developed a framework for engaging with them. Uncertainty no longer paralyzes you. It becomes a space you can move through with intention. There is a recalibration happening at the level of perception. Challenges that once triggered avoidance now trigger engagement. This is not accidental. It is the result of repeated exposure combined with a deliberate reinterpretation of internal signals. Your nervous system learns through experience, and when that experience is paired with conscious awareness, the learning becomes more efficient, more durable. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to detach from the immediate outcome and attach to the process itself. When your focus is exclusively on results, your motivation becomes fragile. It rises and falls based on external validation, timelines, and variables you cannot fully control. But when you anchor your attention to the process, what you are doing right now, how you are doing it, and why it matters, you create stability. This stability allows for deeper focus. And focus, in biological terms, is a limited resource. It is governed by neural circuits that require energy and recovery. When you scatter your attention, you dilute its effectiveness. But when you direct it intentionally, even for short periods, you amplify its impact. The mindset that changes everything includes an understanding that depth often matters more than duration. There is also a relationship between effort and meaning. The brain assigns value to experiences based on the level of engagement required. Tasks that demand more of you, more attention, more persistence, more resilience are often the ones that lead to the greatest sense of fulfillment. This is not coincidental. It is how your system is designed to reinforce behaviors that promote growth. But this only works if you allow yourself to stay with the difficulty long enough for that reinforcement to occur. If you exit too early, you interrupt the cycle. You experience the discomfort without reaching the reward, and your brain learns to avoid similar situations in the future. This is why persistence, even in small increments, is so critical. Another important aspect is how you respond to internal dialogue. Your brain generates thoughts continuously, many of which are automatic and not necessarily aligned with your goals. The mindset shift is not about eliminating these thoughts, but about changing your relationship to them. Instead of treating them as commands, you treat them as data, signals that can be observed, evaluated, and if necessary, disregarded, this creates psychological distance. It allows you to act based on intention rather than impulse. Over time, this distance becomes easier to access. You become less reactive, more deliberate. And this has a cascading effect on every area of your life, from how you handle stress to how you pursue long-term goals. There's also a role for visualization, but not in the way it is often portrayed. It is not about imagining perfect outcomes or effortless success. It is about mentally rehearsing the process, the steps, the challenges, the moments of resistance, and seeing yourself navigate them. This primes your brain for action. It reduces uncertainty and increases the likelihood of follow-through. Your physiology supports this as well. Breathing patterns, posture, and movement all send signals to your brain about your state. When you intentionally adjust these variables, slowing your breath, standing upright, engaging your body, you influence your mental state. This is a two-way system. The mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. Sleep and recovery further shape this process. During rest, your brain consolidates learning, strengthens neural connections, and clears metabolic waste. Without adequate recovery, your ability to focus, regulate emotion, and sustain effort declines. The mindset that changes everything includes respecting these biological constraints, not ignoring them. There is also an element of patience. Neural change does not happen instantly. It requires repetition over time. This can be challenging in a culture that prioritizes speed and immediate results. But when you understand that lasting transformation is built incrementally, you become more willing to invest in the process. You begin to measure progress differently. Instead of looking for dramatic shifts, you look for subtle improvements, a slightly longer period of focus, a slightly faster recovery from distraction, a slightly more resilient response to difficulty. These small gains accumulate, often invisibly, until they reach a tipping point. At that point, what once required conscious effort becomes part of your baseline. You no longer have to convince yourself to act. Action becomes the default. This is where true change occurs, not in isolated moments of motivation, but in sustained patterns of behavior. It's also worth considering the role of uncertainty. The brain naturally seeks predictability, but growth often requires stepping into the unknown. The mindset shift is learning to tolerate and even appreciate that uncertainty. To see it not as a threat, but as an indication that you are operating at the edge of your current capabilities. This edge is where learning happens. It is where new connections are formed, where old patterns are challenged, where potential is expanded. Avoiding this edge keeps you within familiar territory, but it also limits your development. Engaging with it consistently and deliberately is what drives transformation. There will be resistance. That is inevitable. But resistance is not the enemy. It is a signal. It tells you that you are encountering something meaningful, something that requires adaptation. When you learn to interpret resistance this way, it loses its power to stop you. It becomes part of the process. Over time, you start to trust yourself more. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you have evidence, repeated, consistent evidence that you can handle difficulty. This trust is foundational. It reduces hesitation, increases confidence, and allows you to take on greater challenges. And as you continue, you may notice that your goals evolve. What once seemed ambitious becomes normal. What once felt out of reach becomes attainable. This is not because the external world has changed, but because your internal framework has expanded. The mindset that changes everything is not a single decision. It is a continuous practice. It is reinforced through daily actions, through how you interpret your experiences, through how you respond to both success and failure. It is dynamic, adaptable, and deeply personal. Each moment presents an opportunity to reinforce it. Each challenge offers a chance to strengthen it. And each action you take, no matter how small, contributes to the system you are building. When you understand this, you stop waiting for the perfect conditions. You stop relying on fleeting motivation. You start operating from a place of consistency, intention, and awareness. And in doing so, you align your biology, your behavior, and your goals in a way that makes progress not only possible, but inevitable.